Good afternoon. So today I will be discussing regarding guidelines for developmental projects. So this is one of the important topic when we will be discussing with respect to developmental projects. So yesterday we have discussed various impacts caused by the developmental projects on the environment. So first one we have discussed was physical resources, so which includes air quality. The second one we have discussed is water hydrology. We have discussed soil or land under the heading physical resources. Then we have discussed noise. So any developmental project, if we consider, it will either have positive impact or negative impact on the environment. Especially on the physical resources, when we consider developmental projects, mostly we are going to have the negative impact. Air quality, air will get polluted, water will get polluted, there will be variations in in so as I was discussing, the various environmental impacts caused due to developmental projects will be on physical resources. Either it will pollute air, water, soil, or the land use patterns might get changed. There will be deforestation initially, so permanently there will be the loss of that particular land either for agriculture, there will be loss of that particular land which was available for the forest. Because of usage of these particular land for either for transportation project or for industrial project or for urbanization, there will be unwanted sound that will be emitted. So because of that we are going to have noise pollution. The developmental projects will have impact on ecological resources. Which are the various ecological resources that we have already discussed? First one we have discussed is forestry, forests, fisheries, and wildlife. We can take any example of developmental project, either industrialization, urbanization, mining project, transportation project, or river valley projects, or thermal power plant, establishment of nuclear power plants. They are going to have impacts on ecological resources, which include fisheries. Thermal power plant, let us say how it is going to have the impact on fisheries, because thermal power plant produces hot water. When the hot water is discharged in the river or sea or ocean, what will happen? The immediate vicinity of that particular area will be receiving the hot water. The temperature and dissolved oxygen, we call it as oxygen present in the dissolved form, we call it as dissolved oxygen. Its unit is mg per liter, and temperature will be measuring in terms of degrees Celsius. When the hot water is introduced into the river, lake, pond, or sea or ocean where the fishes are present, they will die. If simply we say if hot water is poured, it will die, nobody will get convinced. So we need to convince them in a scientific manner. If I am going to consider a fresh water which is free from pollutants, I am considering a fresh water which is free from pollutants. In that case, we need to measure the temperature of the water. Let us say it is at 0 degrees Celsius. So we have considered a fresh water of 0 degrees Celsius temperature, and it doesn't consist of any contaminants. In that case, it is going to have dissolved oxygen of 14.62 mg per liter. If this water is heated to, let us say, 30 degrees Celsius or so, approximately it will come to 7.6 mg per liter of dissolved oxygen concentration. That means as the temperature rises, dissolved oxygen drops. Fishes consume dissolved oxygen, not free oxygen. We consume free oxygen which is available in the atmosphere. Fishes consume dissolved oxygen because their cells and tissues are like that, and our cells and tissues are something like consumption of, we are capable of consuming free oxygen, and we cannot consume dissolved oxygen. Same way, fishes will consume dissolved oxygen, they cannot consume free oxygen that is available in the atmosphere. So when this hot water is introduced by the thermal power plants, what happens? The temperature of the water increases, the dissolved oxygen decreases. If this dissolved oxygen drops to less than 4 mg per liter, then there will be insufficient quantity of oxygen that will be available, and because of that the fishes are going to die in that particular vicinity of the area where this hot water is being introduced by thermal power plants. This is one of the examples how the developmental projects can have the impact on fisheries. Next factor we have used is human use values. So in this particular human use values, we have discussed various examples connected with the developmental projects. So again, in this one we have also considered the resettlement also. The last one we have discussed was quality of life. The developmental projects will have either positive or negative impact on quality of life. So this will be measured in terms of socio-economic, cultural, and public health. So here also we have considered various examples connected with developmental projects, either road project, airports, or we also considered urbanization, industrialization, and how it is going to have the impact, both positive as well as negative impacts on quality of life, that is on socio-economic factor as well as cultural factor and public health. So these things will be coming under quality of life. Human use values, either it will be in terms of land use or we will be going for resettlement, something like this. So what are the guidelines that need to be followed by the developmental project? Which are the developmental projects we have discussed in yesterday's class? That is mining we have discussed. We have discussed transportation. We have considered urbanization. We also considered industrialization. For power generation, we have considered hydroelectric power, so we called it as River Valley project, thermal power plants, we also discussed nuclear power plants. The mining, if we go in detail, either it might be a major mineral or it might be a minor mineral. So yesterday I discussed with respect to bauxite mining, coal mining, these are major minerals. Minor mineral means, example, sand. Sand mining, stone quarrying. Clay mining. These are the examples for minor minerals. So nowadays, each and every district, it has got its own expert committee members, that is, we call it as DEIA and DEAC. That is district level expert appraisal committee, district level environmental impact assessment committee. So these committees will be looking after mining of minor minerals like stone quarrying, sand mining, whether in that particular district, whether illegal mining is going on. That means when we call it as illegal mining, that is when that particular consultant or the owner or the person who is the owner of that particular mining project, if he is not following the norms, regulations and the guidelines as prescribed by the Department of Environment, in that case it will become the illegal mining. So in that case, what are the guidelines that need to be followed? Now the question comes, whenever we talk about sand mining, why sand mining should be allowed? Sand is natural and sometimes, right, the illegal sand mining will be going on. What do you mean by illegal? See, we need to understand some basic concepts about sand mining or stone quarrying. Sand mining can be done usually during non-monsoon season, not during monsoon. That is when floods and other things will happen. And moreover, if I am going to consider a river that is flowing, so if the sand mining is not allowed, what will happen? These sand deposits, sand will be getting deposited here, and because of this, the flow regime of that particular river itself might get changed over a period of time. Because of deposition of the sand at the bed of the river, what will happen? There will be blockage of the flow, and ultimately what will happen? There will be flood. So many a times, to control the flood, we should allow the sand mining. And for the reason that this sand mining will help, or it will boost the infrastructural activities that are going to be taking place in that particular country or the location or the city or a district or a state. So in that case, to boost the infrastructural development, sand mining should be allowed. To control the floods, to overcome change of direction of the river flow, sand mining should be allowed, but in a controlled manner. Anything more than allowed will become illegal. It will not be called as sustainable mining. So that means we should think about sustainable sand mining. To achieve this sustainable sand mining, DEIA and DEAC committees will be formed, and they will be monitoring all these sand mining operations as well as stone quarrying. Stone quarrying means what? Say, for example, granite stone, basalt rock has to be mined. In that case, what will happen? If I am going to consider a mining site somewhere here, a state highway is passing by. Stone quarrying many times cannot be done by making use of pickaxes and other manual manner. So in that case, we need to go for blasting. Which blasting it is? Controlled blasting. When we say controlled blasting, that means the personal protective equipments required will be of high standard. The monitoring required during controlled blasting has to be much more sophisticated than required. It's not like in your movies when the blasting is being done nearby some mountainous area and the hero will be running. So that is okay only in the movies. If something happens in the real life, then that owner will be sued. So it's very important that some measures have to be taken place when you are going for controlled blasting while going for the stone quarrying. In that case, so it has to be far away from the state highways, wherein we are going to have transportation project where will be movement of the human beings. It should be far away from the railway tracks. So that means for that reason, the guidelines are required. Where exactly these particular stone quarrying project, coal mining project, bauxite mining project should be allowed. So what these guidelines consist of? Let us have an interaction on that. So, in the first guideline, initial environmental examination is very much essential. So, why we should carry out this? The consultant or the proponent should have done initial environmental examination. What is the outcome of this? The outcome we are going to have is whether there are going to be any significant environmental impacts. So when the initial environmental examination is carried out, we are going to get the answer whether this project will have significant environmental impacts. Either it might be on the physical resources, or it might be on the ecological resources, or it will be on the human use values, or it will be on the quality of life. If the answer is yes, then we are going to go for feasibility report. It has to be prepared by the consultant. And it should include EI. The first guideline states, irrespective of whether you are going for mining project, either major mineral or minor mineral, or transportation project, or urbanization, or industrialization, or river valley projects, or power generation by making use of thermal power plants or nuclear power plants, irrespective of these projects. So initial environmental examination is very much essential. That is the first guideline. If you are going to give the plan, layout of nuclear power plant, system design, operation, construction and operation details, the committee may not accept, because the committee is interested in knowing whether this particular project will have any of the impacts, either positive or negative impacts on these particular environmental resources, either physical, ecological, human or quality of life. If yes, on which particular environment it is having, either air quality, water hydrology or soils or forests or wildlife. So in detail the feasibility report has to be prepared. Then overall EIA has to be prepared. This overall EIA should consist of location of project, whether the impact is due to location of the project, say stone quarrying. If a forest is of national importance, in that particular vicinity of the area within 5-kilometer radius, if this eco-sensitive zone is coming, if the forest is coming, wherein the committee has given permission within 5-kilometer radius, if that particular project is coming, then it will have major adverse impacts on forest, wildlife, and there will be encroachment problems towards the forest, and because of this the tigers and other wild animals might move towards rural areas, and those particular people might be facing the problem because of the location of the project. So that means the overall EIA should be prepared covering location of the project, construction phase impacts, operation phase impacts, and system design. The third one is very important. In the first one, what we have done, We have just done initial environmental examination, just like reconnaissance survey. We have just carried out some initial investigation just to find out the rough idea about the adverse impacts or significant impacts on these particular 4 resources. Just to get in detail, just to get the detailed information, the second guideline states the consultant should carry out feasibility report including EIA. Feasibility means general feasibility studies can be done. But when we say including EIA, that means now EIA can be used as decision making process, as a tool for decision making process, and this will also act as a tool to achieve sustainable development. So for these reasons, we will be going for feasibility report study, preparation of feasibility report including EIA. So feasibility studies will be done by consultant. The third guideline states that overall EIA has to be done for the activities which will have the adverse impacts on the environment. Which are those? Those includes location of the project. Because of location, wrong location, this adverse impact might be caused either on forest or wildlife, or the quality of the life might be getting disrupted because of the location. In between, some cultural heritage is coming. So in that particular case, mining, if it is allowed, so that might have to be, those particular decision has to be again reviewed and alternative plans have to be prepared. So location problems will be there many a times. Construction phase impacts. So the equipments used, the operations used during construction might be causing dust problem, it might be causing air pollution, it might be polluting surface water, groundwater. Because of oil spills, there will be soil pollution, and because of usage of heavy machineries, there will be noise pollution. So these things have to be considered in overall EIA with respect to construction phase impacts. Operation phase impacts. When we start mining actually, when we actually start the roads or airports, when we go for nuclear power plants, operation of those thermal power plants, so that means there we are going to have some kind of air pollution, we are going to have water pollution. Thermal power plants, it may not generate heavy metals, but it will generate hot water, as already I have explained. When hot water is discharged into nearby sources, surface water sources or groundwater sources, so the quality of the water will get affected, and because of that, fishes, aquatic animals will also get affected. Operational impacts, so also include the noise pollution. It also includes impacts on socio-economic factor and public health. When air is getting polluted, when the water is getting polluted, if we are going to inhale that air or if we are going to consume that particular water, definitely there will be impact on the public health. That means it is an adverse impact, it is a negative impact. It is a long-term impact, not a short-term. If somebody's health gets affected, that means either it will be a long-term or it will be, even though it is long-term, sometimes it is reversible and many a times it is irreversible impact. So it's one of the examples for operation phase impacts. System design. System design, so what kind of designs we have incorporated, what kind of materials are being incorporated in the design will also decide the impact. With what material the dam is constructed, to generate hydroelectric power so that water can be stored. What is the life of that particular material? Whether it is constructed on earthquake prone areas, so also location details and the system designs are many a times interconnected. So these particular details have to be included in overall EIA, both positive as well as negative, which should include long-term impact, short-term impact, reversible impacts and irreversible impacts. Once the third guideline is followed, next we will be considering cost of EIA, that is towards the number of man either guiding or supervising for preparation of EIA. The next guideline includes cost of EIA towards the number of man or manpower used for guiding and supervising for preparation of the EIA. That means those particular details should be provided in this particular report. Apart from that, when we are talking about cost, time is interlinked. So total time required for EIA, which time we call it as optimal time. Many times the consultant will say, I may require 15 days, I may require 10 years. That is not allowed. So for various projects, some optimal times are being fixed. However, if some constraints are being found which are acceptable, in that case, those optimal timings as suggested by the consultant will be accepted. The last one is total cost towards EIA for the full project. That means the consultant has to prepare the EIA report as per the following guidelines. See, I have got one model environmental clearance for sand mining. So wherein here are the details that need to be filled by that particular owner. So the consultant is going to, environmental consultant is going to fill all these details on behalf of the owner. Just to make you aware, I'll just read out few important points how actually the model environmental clearance for the sand mining will be applied by the consultant. So here, to whom he is going to address, he is going to write to which agency, government agency is going to address for. So the subject is what? Quarrying of river sand in this area, in this village, in this taluk, in this district, he is going to write the subject. So he is going to write the reference in his particular report. This has a reference to your online application dated so and so bearing proposal number. So that number has to be filled. Address to DEIA on the subject mentioned above. So here we need to mention the district name. So apart from that, he is going to give the survey number That means he is going to provide the location details. He is going to mention the corner points, which includes latitude and longitude. That means 4 corner points if you are going to consider. So he is going to provide those particular details in terms of latitude and longitude. And geological department is going to go through this, and they are going to provide some baseline information to these particular owners. So let us say this stone quarrying, if I am considering, usually when we consider stone quarrying, usually 5 years lease will be given. The geology department is going to give the owner to continue the stone quarrying for 5 years. If this particular agency, some agency, let us say agency X, has accepted and they are going to now go for filing of this particular documentation part or report, and they want to submit it in front of the DEIA and DEAC committee for that particular district, let us say Belgaum district. So in that case, how he has to give the planning? Because one is how much hectare of area he is going for mining, that is stone quarrying. The second is depth of excavation. So that means if this is a land, so he has to give the details. Something like this is for the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. So every year he will be allowed to go for 2 meters. 2 meter, 2 meter, 2 and 2. That means at the end of the 5th year, he should not cross 10 meters. If sometimes the area which is available or which is being granted is little bit less, sometimes plus or minus is okay. But in any case, he will not be allowed to go more than 20 meters. So within 5 years, on an average, 10 meter depth of excavation for the stone quarrying or clay mining will be allowed. This includes having the buffer area. That means some area will not be used for mining. These borders will not be used for mining. This will be used for planting the trees all along the border, so that the dust and other particulate matter will not be allowed to move out of his premises. The second important thing is that at the end of the day he should sprinkle the water. That is very important. The third important thing, since this project will have some negative impact, so he has to convert that particular negative impact to positive impact. So what these particular agencies will be doing is, they will be showcasing the upgradation of socio-economic environment by donating some amount of rupees or some textbooks or books, or giving some financial aid to educational institutions or orphan organizations, so that they are going to support them financially, and this is going to have positive socio-economic environment. This is going to have the positive impact on socio-economic environment. Public health. So if they are going to follow the norms, plantation of 3,000 trees within 5 years, 5,000 trees within 5 years, sprinkling the water so that dust will be getting suppressed. That means if they are going to showcase that public health will not get affected much, that means again this will have positive note in the guidelines. Third, cultural. So if the agency is going to incorporate the details of the location in such a way that it won't affect cultural heritages or the archaeological sites, or it will not have any impact on forest or wildlife, again it will be taken as a positive note. That means this particular location of that particular project, either it might be a sand mining or the stone quarrying, whatever it is. So this will not have any impact on the forest or wildlife. Again, it will be taken as a positive note. So they will also mention the cost towards EIA. How many manpower is being used for guiding or for supervising for preparation of this particular EIA? If this cost is little bit more or less, so how they are going to manage that? So that is also the question. The second is optimal time required, because if so many consultants or manpower is being used, so how the coordination will be like? So whether this particular EIA will be prepared in within prescribed time period. So that's why the manpower and the optimal time are little bit interconnected. The total cost towards EIA. This total cost includes the cost towards location of the project, that means procuring the land, construction, the cost towards construction, cost towards operation, and cost towards system design, and the cost towards socio-economic factors and for public utilities. So sometimes the toilet may not be there in the villages. So these agencies, to showcase the positive impact on, because the committee is going to grant them a clearance, so they would like to showcase the positive impact on socio-economic factors. Sometimes they will be going for construction of the toilets in the rural areas, wherein the villagers may not have the financial aid to construct the toilets. So these are few examples wherein the consultant or the owner of the mining is going to showcase their project in terms of positive impacts on public health, cultural heritages, socio-economic factors, as well as on the ecological resources. So which are the guidelines those particular consultants or the agencies should follow are: first one is initial environmental examination. The second one is preparation of feasibility report by consultant. So the agency or the owner of the mining site should catch hold of some consultant to prepare the feasibility report. The third one, overall EIA has to be documented for significant environmental impacts, adverse impacts. Either it might be connected with location of the project, construction phase impacts, cost, operation phase impacts, or system designs. So these things have to be documented in the third one. In the fourth one, as per the guideline, cost of EIA towards the number of manpower used for guiding and supervising, and for preparation of EIA has to be documented. In the fifth one, total optimal time required for preparing the EIA, that has to be documented. That has to be documented in this particular report. And sixth one is total cost towards EIA. Apart from that, initially they are going to write, before describing all these particular details, when the owner is going to file for environmental clearance, either for sand mining, stone quarrying, or any of the projects. So he is going to write the date, to whom he is going to address, sir, subject, so what for he is applying, and details along with the survey number of the land, location details of the corner points, and he should also get the clearance from geological department, and he should also state the area in hectares and production capacity. That means how much production he is going for. See, in a year, how much amount of stone quarrying he would like to go for. If he claims 1 lakh tons, for that he may not get the environmental clearance. If he claims, okay, I'll go for 2-meter depth every year and I'll go for around 20,000 tons of stone quarrying. So in that case, he'll be allowed for the project. So with this, your portion is completed. This completes unit number 5. So already covered various environmental impacts due to developmental activities. This is with respect to guidelines for developmental projects. So you can make a note of the flow chart, and you need to elaborate each of the points which are being described in the flow chart. So there are totally 6 points. So that means you need to elaborate around 6 paragraphs. Okay, with this I'll just complete. Thank you.